Rick Barnes has a lifetime contract at Tennessee, but he may not need nearly that long to get this team to their first ever Final Four appearance.
You are Locked On College Basketball, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
What's up, folks, and welcome into the Locked On College Basketball Podcast, a daily national college hoop show, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. I'm your host, Andy Patton, and you are joining us at the place to get your college basketball content every single day, Monday through Friday, throughout the offseason, and now here as we are less than a week away until the official start of the 25-26 college basketball season. Want to remind all of you that you can find this show ad-free on Amazon Music, and thank all of you who are making this show your first listen or your first watch of the day. And remind folks, today's episode is brought to you by Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONCollege, and folks, you'll get $20 off your first purchase. Well, today is our 31st team preview heading into the season. We got at least one more coming your way in the middle of this week, potentially two more, and then bam, we are into the regular season. Next Monday's episode previewing the first games of the year. Cannot wait to be talking about real college basketball games, although we had a lot of fun on Monday's show talking about fake college basketball games, exhibition games, including that Duke win over Tennessee. And we're going to talk a lot more about that game today, as number 31 in our team preview series is indeed the Vols of Tennessee. We're going to talk about Rick Barnes getting that lifetime contract. We're going to talk about the offseason, losing a couple of All-Americans, 5 of their 6 leading scorers, but bringing in some very, very high, exciting upside pieces for this team. And we're going to take a look at the schedule and predict how we think Tennessee will do in the SEC and in the NCAA tournament this upcoming season. Start the show off looking back at last year. Rick Barnes and the Vols went 30-8 last season, including going 12-6 in the SEC. That was good for a 4th place finish in what was the most dominant individual conference pretty much in the history of college basketball. So to finish top 5 in that league, to go 12-6 in conference play is incredibly impressive. Again, to highlight the kind of absurdity of the SEC, they finished 4th in the SEC. And yet when the final AP poll came out at the end of the season, they were ranked 5th. That's how ridiculous the SEC was last year. Rick Barnes and the Vols earned themselves a 2 seed in the NCAA tournament. We've seen them kind of right in that 2-3 line the last couple of years. They beat 15 seed Wofford and then 7 seed UCLA in the first weekend to get out to the Sweet 16. Then they beat a 3 seeded Kentucky team, a matchup of SEC foes there, beat them by 13 points for Tennessee to advance to the Elite Eight. And then they were staring straight down the barrel at potentially Tennessee's first ever appearance in the Final Four. One of, if not the most successful program in college basketball history to have never made a Final Four appearance. They had the opportunity. They were squaring off against number 1 seed Houston, unfortunately unable to get much of anything going offensively against the Cougs, end up falling in a not particularly close game, 69-50. Was the final score against the Cougs. Houston advances. Of course, we know they come within a possession of winning their first national championship. Instead, it goes to another SEC team in Florida. And meanwhile, Tennessee is still left holding the bag, waiting for their first ever Final Four appearance. Storylines for this team, obviously, we've touched on one of them already, but I think a big one for this team, they lost 2 All-Americans from last year's roster. Chaz Lanier came in, transferred from North Florida, kind of brought in part to replace the production of Dalton Knecht, who was so good 2 years ago for this team, who had transferred also from Northern Colorado, comes up from the mid-major ranks, steps into an All-American role for Tennessee, and then Knecht leaves. He goes in the first round of the NBA draft, and they go out and get Chaz Lanier to replace him. And Lanier does a lot of the same things. Wasn't quite as overall impactful as Knecht, but was still a All-American. There was, I think, one place that had him as a first teamer. Most places had him as a second or third team. And what we saw from Lanier was, again, a lot of the same stuff we saw from Knecht. 18 points per game, shot just under 40% from 3 on the season, and was kind of asked to be that go-to offensive weapon for Tennessee, the same way they looked at Knecht in that role. You also lose Zakai Ziegler. who was at Tennessee seemingly for a decade. It felt like he was there for a very long time because he was an ultra productive player in the SEC for many, many years. Finished his senior season at Tennessee, averaging about 13.5 points, 7.5 assists, and about 2 steals per game. And Ziegler wanted to be back. This was a big storyline this offseason. He sued the NCAA. He was attempting to get another year of eligibility to continue to compete at the college basketball level. The NCAA denied him that opportunity. He was not able to return to college basketball, to Tennessee. So 2 big losses for Tennessee, but not the only losses for the Vols overall. They lost 5 of their 6 leading scorers from last year's team. The only one returning is Felix Okpara. They lose Lanier and Ziegler. They also lose Jordan Gainey, Igor Milichitz, and Jemai Mashak. They also lose Darlingstoon Dubar. Most of these guys were seniors. In fact, every single one of these players was a senior on this roster. The only one who went straight into the NBA was Lanier. Mashak, I think, on a 2-way contract, but everybody else was just out of eligibility. So you kind of knew that there was going to be a pretty transformative offseason coming up for Tennessee. And while they did utilize the transfer portal, and we'll get to some of the specific roster construction in the second segment, this team got a lot younger. That tends to happen when you have 5 graduating or 6 graduating seniors on your roster. They brought in some freshmen to replace them. They brought in some younger transfers to replace them. And they're also just kind of taking on a bit of a next man up mentality with some guys stepping into bigger roles who were on this team last year. A nice kind of blend of that youthful upside, that veteran talent, some newcomers, some returners as well. But anytime a team loses 5 of their 6 leading scorers, there's going to be some level of skepticism about whether the team can repeat what they did the previous year. Again, it wasn't as simple as replacing Lanier with Connect for Tennessee last year, but a lot of the same pieces were in place. You knew Ziegler was going to be back, and you knew you were going to get similar production from him. Same with Mashak, same with Gainey. And this year, you're having to ask multiple players to fill different roles that they didn't have to do last year. Really, the only player who I think is returning to more or less the same role on this team is Felix Okpara. Everybody else is stepping into a bigger role or is new on this roster. So it's going to be a bit of a challenging year for Rick Barnes. I'm not saying the talent isn't there. It's very clearly there. It's just harder to coach and make adjustments on a roster that is not nearly as connected and not nearly as continuous as the year prior. So I think that we'll see some ups and downs from Tennessee throughout the season, maybe more than we're used to. But ultimately, all that matters is how much this team can coalesce and get themselves, straightened out, getting into conference play, getting into March as well. Other stuff for Tennessee from a storyline perspective, Rick Barnes signed that lifetime contract in August. He turned 71 years old in July. The deal was already through 2028 for Barnes, but now starting in 2028, his contract will renew automatically every year on April 15th for as long as he wants to continue to coach. I'm not sure the lifetime contract was really more than anything performative, because it's very possible Barnes does not coach much, if at all, past 2028. I'm not trying to put him into an early retirement or anything like that, but he's already 71 years old. By 2028, he'll be 73, 74 years old. He may be calling it quits at that time, but if not, Tennessee has welcomed him to continue to coach as long as he wants to coach. Bill Self signed a similar deal at Kansas. Gino Auriemma has signed a similar deal for the women's team at UConn. And Barnes has completely deserved this. He's been the most successful head coach in Tennessee basketball history, has won 66% of his games over the last 10 years with the Vols. He's made 4 Sweet 16s. He's made the Elite Eight twice. He has won 3 SEC titles. He's made the NCAA tournament 7 straight years, which is the 4th longest active streak in college basketball. And he is college basketball's active win leader. 838 career wins for Barnes, dating back to the 1980s when he was a coach at George Mason. He's also coached Providence, Clemson, Texas, just been all over the map for Rick Barnes. Very, very successful coach, and not a surprise to see him get this honor. But the big question for Tennessee, can they finally make that Final Four? And we'll give some predictions. We'll give some thoughts on how we think this specific iteration of Tennessee's roster will do. But it remains a big surprise that of all the success that Tennessee has had, they still have yet to climb that final kind of marker and get into that Final Four. Barnes has only done it once. In a coaching career that has spanned nearly 40 years, Barnes has only made the Final Four once, and that was when he was at Texas with Kevin Durant back in 2003. Or actually, no, it was with TJ Ford on that roster back in 2003 that he made the Final Four. Other than that, Barnes has not been there. So both of them are looking for something that has really eluded them, and we'll see if we can get that happening either this year or soon before Barnes ends up calling it quits. Well, like we said, folks, the Vols lost 5 of their 6 leading scorers, but they've added themselves a superstar freshman as well as an elite veteran guard. Will it all fit together? We're going to talk about that coming up in just a second. But first, folks, the NBA is back, and there is no better place to get in on the action than FanDuel, the official sports betting partner of the NBA. Even if you missed the start of a game or you just want to ride the hot hand, FanDuel has live bets on everything from who's going to score next to those fourth quarter comeback predictions. Plus, you can even combine your live bets into a same game parlay for a shot at a bigger payout. It keeps every game exciting, especially when your team's making that late push. And looking at college basketball odds, SEC, Tennessee is at plus 900 to win the SEC. That's behind Florida, who's at plus 250, Kentucky, who's at plus 410, Arkansas at plus 550, and Bama at plus 600. So Tennessee right in the mix there with some of those top teams. If you feel confident about the Vols and Rick Barnes getting them their 4th title in his tenure, then what are you waiting for? Right now, FanDuel is giving new customers $300 in bonus bets when your first $5 bet wins. So head to FanDuel.com to sign up and play your game with FanDuel, the official sports betting partner of the NBA. All right, folks, segment 2, still Andy Patton, still locked on college basketball, still giving you our Tennessee team preview here, number 31 of our team preview series here before the college basketball season gets underway officially, which is now less than a week away. We talked about Tennessee's history, what they did last year, Rick Barnes getting that contract, and some new faces on this roster, but that's what I want to get into more here in the second segment. We got 7 returners for Tennessee, which sounds like more than you'd expect because really only a couple of them were key pieces to this team last year. There's a couple of guys who were injured, a couple of guys who really didn't play much or at all last season. So the returning group sounds a little bit bigger than it actually is, but it is, of course, headlined by Felix Okpara, who averaged about 7 points, 6.5 boards, and just under 2 blocks per game last year. Okpara, again, I mentioned we're going to reference this exhibition game against Duke. Okpara was very good in that game on Sunday night, 11 points, 8 boards. He was 5 of 6 from the field. He also very smoothly knocked down an outside shot. If you listen to Monday's show, Isaac and I talked about that and Okpara's ability to space the floor, potentially being a nice bonus for Tennessee this year offensively. Cade Phillips is back as well, averaged about 4.5 points, 3.5 boards, and a block per game last year. Put up pretty similar numbers in the exhibition game in 17 minutes, 4 points, 3 boards, and a pair of assists. A pair of blocks in that game. JP Estrella is also back, just played 3 games last year dealing with the injury, but Rick Barnes is hoping to get him more involved in the team this year. He played just 8 minutes in the exhibition game, but Barnes said afterwards that he was not limited playing time-wise, so certainly somebody who could end up factoring more into the mix, at least competing for those roles. He had 5 points and 2 boards in that game. And then there's Bishop Boswell. Bishop Boswell played 28 games last year for Tennessee, only about 4 minutes per game, but he started and played 24 minutes in this exhibition game against Duke. It was a bit of a surprise to see Boswell start. And again, Barnes addressed it after the exhibition game and basically said we liked him for his defense, but we need to see more from him offensively. He only took 2 shot attempts. He didn't even score. Again, in 24 minutes, Bishop Boswell did not score a single point. Obviously, Tennessee prides itself on their defense, and they love to have those tough-nosed physical defenders at the point of attack, but you need to be able to bring a little bit more offensively. Boswell did have 3 assists and certainly looks to be a bigger part of the team this year, whether he ends up in the starting lineup or not. 3 other returners, all who did not play in the exhibition game and don't figure to play much, if at all, this season: Grant Hurst, Campbell Duncan, and Gavin Paul as well. But the excitement for this Tennessee team is mostly in the newcomers, a trio of players coming in from the transfer portal, 4 freshmen as well, and then a couple international guys. One of them, Ethan Berg, redshirted last year, but so he's an international newcomer. He's also a bit of a returner, 6'3" guard from Israel, had 6 points and a pair of boards in the exhibition game. But the 3 transfers is where I want to start here. Ja'Kobi Gillespie, coming over from Maryland. getting some buzz as a potential All-American this upcoming season, was excellent last year for the Terps, averaged about 15 points, 5 assists, 2 steals for that Maryland team, part of the Crab Five, that electric starting lineup for that Maryland team. He was great in this exhibition game. Wasn't his most efficient self, 19 points on 21 shots, but he did have 8 assists. He's going to shoot better than 3 of 13 from 3 most of the time. Again, Barnes kind of talked about this team's they need other players to step up and score because there was too many shot attempts from Gillespie and Nate Ament, who you'll talk about in a second. But Gillespie is going to be one of the best guards in the SEC. There's not really any debate about that. Jalen Carey comes over from Vanderbilt, an SEC to SEC transfer, averaged about 8 and 6 last year for the Commodores. Had 4 points and an assist in 2 of 5 shooting in 11 minutes. He did start, but he only played 11 minutes in that game against Duke. And then there's Amari Abram coming over from La Tech, averaged about 12 points, 4.5 boards, and 1.5 steals last year for that La Tech team. Had just 3 points, 2 boards, and 2 assists in 12 minutes in the exhibition game. And then you look at the freshman class. Obviously, it is headlined by Nate Ament, who is the next tier behind those big three in Cam Boozer and AJ Dibansa and Darren Peterson. Those are the freshmen that are getting all of the attention, but Ament is number 4 out of that group, alongside guys like Mikkel Brown and Chris Senack and Caleb Wilson and a few others as well. And Ament, we saw the good and the bad with him on Sunday in that exhibition game. He finished with 14 points, 10 boards, but he was 5 of 19 from the field, including 0 of 5 from 3. Nate Ament did not look like somebody who can create his own shot consistently. And it felt like when Tennessee was putting him on the ball and letting him try to create and find his own shots, even when he made shots, they were difficult. It just didn't feel like he was getting good open looks. We're talking about a true freshman before the season has even begun. That is the very important caveat. Because he was struggling to find his own shot in this game does not mean that he will be incapable of doing that for the entire season. In fact, I would be shocked if that was the case, but it does make me wonder if we will see Gillespie have even more of a responsibility handling the ball and being on the ball, and they let Ament play more off the ball and potentially get some open looks that way. I think that's probably going to better serve Tennessee, certainly early in the year, but potentially throughout the season as well. I think that's better for Tennessee. It may not be better for Ament and his draft stock. I saw somebody post that it feels like Ament's the kind of guy that teams are going to be looking at theoretical in the draft of like, well, Ament could be this, but you're not necessarily going to see all of the things that he's capable of being by the time the draft rolls around, because he may not be asked to do that for a Tennessee team that's caring a lot more about winning basketball than letting Nate Ament do, what he wants or needs to do. So it'll be interesting to see kind of how that balance shakes out this season. Other newcomers for Tennessee in the freshman class: Amari Evans, 6'5" combo guard, 50th ranked player in this recruiting class. Dwayne Brown, the second, a 6'8" center, 109th in the class. He was very good in that exhibition game, 13 minutes, but he had 10 points and 6 rebounds on 5 of 5 shooting. Really strong performance from Brown, and I think a guy that should be a little bit more on the radar for Tennessee this season after that performance. Troy Henderson's a 6'1", 3-star point guard coming in as well. Internationally, we already mentioned Ethan Berg, also Clarence Masamba, who's a 6'5" combo guard from Monaco, 4-star rating at 247 Sports. Obviously, tons of departures for this team. We've already headlined all of them. Everybody who graduated, all of the seniors. The only transfer out for Tennessee was Cameron Carr, who's transferred to Baylor. Other than that, everybody else departed because they ran out of eligibility. The starting lineup for Tennessee in this exhibition game against Duke was Felix Okpara, Nate Ament, Jalen Carey, Boswell, and then Gillespie. I think there's a pretty good chance that ends up being your starting lineup. Obviously, it makes sense that you would put out a starting 5 that you expect to be a realistic starting 5 for you, especially in a game like that. I am curious if Boswell will hold on to that starting spot or not. Again, he did not score in 24 minutes. Coach Barnes talked about him afterwards and his defense and what he brings to the team, but he also specifically mentioned Mo, which is what they call Amari Abram, the transfer from La Tech, as somebody that they kind of wanted to see what he would look like in a 6th man role coming off the bench. I think there's a decent chance that Abram ends up stepping into that starting role. I think a little bit more offense, a little bit more scoring might be better for that starting lineup. And then you bring the defense off the bench in Boswell. But it's hard to go against what we saw Barnes do. So I think that starting five against Duke may end up being what they do to begin the season, but keep an eye on Abram as somebody who might step into that starting lineup. And then your depth rotation, obviously one of Boswell and Abram. I think Brown's going to play a big role as the backup center off the bench after that strong performance against Duke. And then you have, Cade Phillips coming back after playing a decent role for this team last year. Estrella, if he's healthy, he's going to play a big role for this team. And I think Berg, the redshirt freshman from Israel, I think he's going to play a decent role for this team as well. And I already talked about him a little bit, so I won't spend too much time here, but my X factor for this team is Amari Abram. And that's because you kind of know what you're going to get out of Ja'Kobi Gillespie. Certainly he is the most, if not the second most important player on this roster. Gillespie and Ament that's how this season goes, is how those two guys go. I think that's very clear. I don't think there's much of a secret there that Nate Ament and Ja'Kobi Gillespie are going to be the driving forces behind this Tennessee team. But to me, the X factor is Abram, because you need more scoring from that two spot. And you need somebody who can take a little bit of gravity away from Gillespie, from Ament. If you have somebody else who can score, if you have a defensive player in that spot who doesn't do much offensively, that's going to allow the defense to focus more in on Gillespie and or Ament. And I think Abram, this is a guy who shot 37% on over 5 attempts per game from three last year. If he's able to get open looks from three and knock them down, that puts more strain and pressure on the defense. I think he's a very critical player for Rick Barnes and the Vols this upcoming season. Well, folks, the Vols have some early season opportunities to kind of tinker with their lineup before they get into a gauntlet in December and then, of course, into conference play. Can Rick Barnes mix and match this team to a top 3 finish in the SEC and a deep run in March? We're going to talk about that in just a second. But first, folks, college basketball is back, and I could not be more excited. The madness, the rivalries, the energy in the stands, there's just nothing quite like it. But let's be real, actually getting tickets, that can feel like more of a battle than the game itself. Endless queues, hidden fees, prices jumping at checkout. And that's why I use Game Time, the app that gives the advantage back to the fans. It's the easiest way to score last-minute tickets at the best prices with no surprise fees. What you see, that's what you pay. And honestly, it's faster, it's cheaper, and it's less stressful than any other way that I've bought tickets. And I love that you can find the views from your seat right there in the app. You got Louisville at Tennessee. We're going to talk about this schedule, but that is a monster home game for the Vols at Thomas Bowling Arena, December 16th. There are plenty of tickets available on Game Time right now. You can get tickets in 319 row 2. You can see the view. It's a beautiful view of the court, and they're just $54 a piece. So folks, takes the guesswork out of buying college tickets by using Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONCollege, and you'll get $20 off your first purchase. Again, that's promo code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off. Terms apply. Swipe, tap, ticket, go. Download Game Time today. All right, folks, segment 3, still Andy Patton, still Locked On College Basketball Podcast, and we are still going through our Tennessee basketball team preview episode here with less than a week until the season gets underway officially on November 3rd. And we're going to talk a little bit about Tennessee's schedule. We're going to talk about who they're playing in conference and then make some projections, how they're going to do in the SEC, how they're going to do in the regular season overall and the NCAA tournament, give you our thoughts on this team's ceiling and their floor. Looking at their schedule, obviously we already had the exhibition game against Duke on Sunday, but what I like about this schedule for Rick Barnes and the Vols, again, a new look roster, only a handful of returners who played any minutes of significance last year for this team. You challenge them right away in a incredible home environment for that exhibition game against one of the best teams in college basketball in Duke. It doesn't count in the standings, but you are challenging your team. And then you get into the regular season, and your first non-conference games are opportunities for this team to tinker a little bit. You don't have any super challenging games on the schedule until late November. You open up against Mercer on November 3rd, and then you got Northern Kentucky, North Florida, Rice, and Tennessee State. Those are your first 5 games on the schedule. Before you get to the Players Era Festival, Tennessee is participating in this Las Vegas Players Era Festival, the NIL festival as it is, where every team gets $1 million just for participating. Not the best draw to start for Tennessee. They open up against Rutgers on November 24th. Should be a W there, but again, not exactly a super competitive game. At least we don't expect it to be. Their next game, November 25th, though, is a rematch from the Elite Eight last last year. Tennessee will take on Houston in that game on November 25th. And then their third game in the Players Era Festival will be either the 26th or 27th. The opponent will be determined after those first two games. After that, Tennessee has their lone road game of the non-conference schedule. It is at Syracuse as part of the ACC-SEC Challenge, heading out to New York. Then they come back. They play Illinois on a neutral floor. Granted, that neutral floor is in Nashville at the Bridgestone Arena against a very, very good Illini team. After that, there's a bit of a gap before Tennessee takes on Louisville. That is at home for Tennessee, a really, really fun game against Pat Kelsey and the Cardinals on December 16th. Then two more non-con games at home against Gardner-Webb and South Carolina State. Love this non-conference schedule. All of their tough games are bunched together in a 3-week period of time between late November and mid-December, but that's pretty typical for these good programs, and I think a smart move for this Tennessee team, especially with so many new faces on the roster. Conference play, they're playing Kentucky, Alabama, and Vanderbilt twice each. And then they got 6 teams just at home. That's Texas, A&M, Auburn, Ole Miss, LSU, and Oklahoma. And then 6 teams they're only facing on the road. That would be Arkansas, Missouri, Georgia, Florida, Mississippi State, and South Carolina. I project that this Tennessee team is going to be right outside the top 2, somewhere in that 3 to 5 range. Not exactly a bold prediction, but we're not claiming that it's a bold prediction. For Tennessee, I think Florida and Kentucky are the 2 teams to beat in the SEC, and I have a hard time seeing anybody clipping those 2 teams just in terms of the depth and talent and coaching that those 2 programs have in particular. But I wouldn't be shocked at all if Tennessee is third. I think that group of teams kind of competing for third in this conference is Tennessee, Bama, Arkansas. Maybe Vanderbilt and Ole Miss can kind of sneak into that conversation. But for me, it's really going to be probably some combination of Tennessee, Bama, and Arkansas are those 3 through 5 in whatever order. Right now, I would probably take Tennessee at 3 with Bama at 4, but those 2 are very close. Tennessee, a better defensive team. Alabama, a better offensive team. Both have some key returners. Bama more so with LeBaron Philon coming back in particular. But I think that those are 2 really close, evenly matched teams. We see that like Ken Pom and Torvik and other places have those 2 teams really close together in the rankings. So I think that's going to be a really fun battle potentially to get that double bye in the SEC tournament, which is where you got to finish in the top 4 to do so. For Tennessee, just taking a look at their non-con and their conference schedule, I projected them to go 11-2 in the non-con. I think they lose to Houston in the Players Era Festival. And then I think they lose one of the either home or semi-home games to either Illinois or Louisville. And then in conference play, I'm going 12-6. Last year I think they went 12-6 exactly last year. I think they're projected at like Ken Pom and other places to go 11-7. So they're going to be right in that range. Again, 12-6 would be an incredible result for a very new look roster in what I expect to be maybe not quite as dominant of an SEC as it was last year, but a conference that should still be excellent. And if not the best conference in college basketball, will be right in there with the Big 12 and the Big 10, and is going to be loaded top to nearly bottom in this conference. So 12-6 would be a phenomenal result for Rick Barnes and the Vols. If they do that, that would be 23-8 out of the regular season. That should get them in that 3-4 seed conversation. I would expect to be a 3 seed if you go 23-8 before getting into the conference tournament. Obviously, if you get upset early in the conference tournament, if you get a 3 seed in the SEC tournament, you don't get a chance to get upset early. So they should be in good shape. I think they're a 3 seed in the NCAA tournament. I think they're a Sweet 16 team. I'm not sure I'm projecting this team to be a Final Four team, but if you get to the Sweet 16, anything can happen at that point. The ball bounces your way for a game or two, and suddenly you're making history for the Vols. Ceiling and floor for this team. The ceiling to me is like a 2 seed. I'd be pretty surprised if they found their way into the 1 seed conversation, but I could see them on the 2 line. I could see them finishing 3rd in the SEC. I could see the ball bouncing the right way and they finish 2nd in the conference, maybe clip a game on Florida or Kentucky. And the ceiling truly is the first ever Final Four for this team. It is well within the realm of possibility for this team if they hit their ceiling. That requires Nate Ament to play at an All-American level. That requires Ja'Kobi Gillespie to also play at an All-American level. It requires the defense to remain elite, to be tough, to be physical. Apara needs to be one of the best bigs in the SEC in terms of gobbling up rebounds. Being able to space the floor a little bit certainly wouldn't hurt either, and you just need that depth to be strong and healthy. The floor for this team is in that 8-9 seed range. just that dreaded, oh, we're going to have to play a 1 seed in the second round. I'd be pretty surprised if Tennessee fell that far. I think even if you finish, 7th or 8th in the SEC, that might still be good enough to get a 6th seed in the NCAA tournament. So falling all the way to the 8-9 seed would be like finishing 9th or so in the SEC. Seems pretty unlikely. But again, if Ament struggles, if he struggles to impact the game offensively and is struggling because his creation skills aren't really there, but he's not really sure how to play an off-ball role, that could lead to some issues for this Tennessee team. It would put a lot of pressure on Ja'Kobi Gillespie. He would have to deliver so much offensively and defensively for this team. And I just think that's a lot to put on one player's plate and could end up kind of costing them more games than they'd care to admit. And then just the depth just maybe isn't there in key spots. They're relying on guys who didn't play much for this team last year. They're relying on transfers who maybe, there's some question marks about how impactful they can be. I think this team's more likely to hit the ceiling than the floor, certainly, but there are some things that could go wrong for this Vols team and put them in a position where we're not even talking about the Final Four whatsoever come March. It's going to wrap it up for me today here on the Locked On College Basketball Podcast. Folks, thank you so much for making this show your first listen or your first watch of the day. Isaac will be back with you all for a preview of a fun ACC team on Wednesday's show. One more show for you on Thursday, and then we're getting that Big 12 conference preview, the final one, out of the way on Friday before we're talking real basketball next week. As always, we want to say apologies to the Lawyer family. Let's go Wild Popes. Cheers to the Mick Bruins. And until tomorrow, peace out.